How do I operate? How do I work? How do I keep stepping if I'm a failure? God gave me an identity that was unshakable. So when I failed so many exams, I thought, like, what is the point? Like, who am I? Like, what is the point of living? Like, I remember just being transformed in. Hello everyone, my name is Francesca and I'm a first year resident doctor working here in Birmingham. Many of you guys will recognize me because I used to do small videos back in the day on this channel by the name of Simply Fran, and back in 2020 I decided to take just a small break, and that small break kind of turned into 5 years. I am now a resident doctor. Jesus has been a pivotal part of my story, so I really wanted to film a video just on my testimony. I think there's something really powerful in sharing your stories. It shows that no one is perfect, nor is anyone's journey. And also I think it encourages people to reach out to others who are either role models going through similar situations or those who are inspired by them. So this is a little bit, just a tiny bit of my story. Okay, so let's start. Back in 2020, COVID, 2020, the panoramic, coronavirus, COVID-19. This was at the end of my first year and the beginning of my second year. During 2020, I struggled so much with my studies. Oxford, as we know, is a challenging place. Just the intensity and the sheer volume of like content that you need to cover, just the levels that they expect you to perform at, was, I found, in many ways well beyond my capability. I found myself failing the majority of my exams. We sat 7 exams that year and I failed 4 of them. One of them I was borderline for. I had to have a viva, which is where you're interviewed by a panel of like professors across different colleges, and they essentially get you to justify why you should pass that module. Thank God I passed that module, but then I still had to resit 4. And over lockdown in particular, where I felt like looking back now, I can see that I probably was depressed, I was low, I was unmotivated, I wasn't enjoying the same things that I was doing before, I wasn't looking after myself. Like, that further kind of worsened my academic performance. And then as my identity was intertwined with my academic performance, that worsened my sense of self. And I found that my identity was so shaken. Like, who is Francesca? Who was Francesca without her studies? Francesca was this girl who was creating, well, I used to go by Fran, iOS update, guys. Who I was so intertwined with my studies. So when I failed so many exams, I thought, like, what is the point? Like, who am I? Like, what is the point of living? Like, how do I operate? How do I work? How do I keep stepping if I'm a failure? And I found myself just having an identity crisis. I think the word for it was identity crisis. At the time, so I grew up in a Christian home. I would say that my faith was very much nominal meaning like just a title, really. Like, I very much went to church because that was the thing my parents did. I didn't have a faith of my own. I didn't have a strong faith of my own. So I'm in this place where I'm feeling low, COVID is happening, oh guys, I didn't even give you the numbers, the absolute figures. So in my second year of university, this is not even funny, I found myself at that time as well just being like drawn to Christian community in weird ways. Like, it wasn't like I was actively seeking it out, but rather it felt like almost like something was chasing after me. I was invited to different Christian groups in my university. I was invited to find a church, in which I did. Here I saw Christians who had this almost like this sense of identity that was beyond anything that I'd ever seen. They had peace that surpassed like their situation. They were motivated to do things that didn't make sense to me. For example, serve people so generously, even if it, I thought, was to their own detriment. I was just seeing a group of people radically living differently to others, and I was inspired and I wanted a bit of what they had. And I remember reading the book of Romans and it transformed me. The book of Romans is a book written by the Apostle Paul to the church in Rome at a time where Christians were being persecuted in Rome. So this would have been after Jesus died, rose again and ascended to heaven. So Paul was this excellent theologian who explained a lot of concepts surrounding Jesus. And yeah, there are 2 key verses that transformed me and transformed my sense of identity. One is Romans 5:8, which talks about how God demonstrated his love that whilst we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And then the second verse is Romans 8:1. There is now no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. So before this point, I would say that my view of God was very much fear-based. I thought God's love for you is proportionate to how good you are, how generous you are, how good of a Christian you are. That was my view of God beforehand. I realized that actually, though I still continue to go on and do things that are wrong and hurt God and hurt other people and hurt myself, Jesus Christ still died for me. He took the place in the punishment for me. So that now, for me to go to heaven is not determined by my own good works, but rather by God's, by Jesus's. Wow, there is no human being who would sacrifice his life so selflessly, so generously for people who may or would never even recognize it or be grateful for it. There is nothing like that in the history of mankind. And I remember coming to that realization and thinking, wow, oh my gosh, I want to learn more about this God. Oh my gosh, I want to learn more about this God who loves me so radically that he died for me even before I had the chance to sit down, open my Bible and try and figure out who he was. Yeah, so there was that, and then there's no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. I remember just feeling so set free by that verse, because the person who I was before, the mistakes that I'd made before, the ways in which I'd been so self-absorbed in my own achievements, no longer was I condemned by that, no longer was I justified by that, but instead I had a new identity in Christ. I came from a place of fragility and vulnerability, having previously put my identity in my performance, and having seen that crumble before my very eyes, and having been left in a place where I'm asking myself, who am I? If it's not for my studies per se, who am I? And here I am finding a God who loves me and has died for me, and now I'm learning that he's giving me an identity that is no longer justified by what I do, but rather an identity in Jesus. And the reason why it's so striking and important is because in this life, in this world, there are so many ways that we can identify ourselves. When we meet people for the first time, just imagine yourself at a cocktail party. One of the first questions is, okay, what's your name? Oh, what do you do? We can tie in our work, our performance, into our identity. But then what happens when you lose your job? What happens when, for example, in my case, you fail exams at one of the top universities in the world? Or your identity can be placed in your possessions, like you're a person who drives a Porsche, or you're a person who owns however many houses. What happens when you go bankrupt? Or what happens when, God forbid, there's a fire or flood, which means that your possessions are lost overnight. Countless studies talk about and show how individuals who have sturdy identities tend to be more resilient. They are more adaptable. They're less influenced by the highs and the lows of life. I don't know about you guys, but I'm naturally a person who is all over the place, guys. Please, I don't want to use the A word. I don't want to use the A word because that might not necessarily be my case. But life is pretty chaotic. I need to be anchored and I need to be rooted. Otherwise, I just spiral. I'll be spiraling out of control. Having a stable identity that comes from something outside of myself and not in others is just transformative. I really like this passage from Ephesians 1 because in it, he is telling the church their identity. Here we're told that you have been, Francesca, you're a daughter of Christ. You've been predestined, you've been chosen by Christ. You are wise, you are forgiven, you have all understanding. So I remember just feeling so anchored by this, that despite the wins, the challenges that life inevitably will throw at me in medical school, just in life, I can anchor myself to this sense of identity. And it's helped. Even if I don't believe it, there is something powerful just about reading the words, saying the words out loud, and the effect that it has on your psychology. When you operate from that place of identity, stable, positive identity, you notice that your actions, your decision making falls in alignment with it. And I think the book Atomic Habits, I'm talking like I've read the whole thing, bro, I've read one chapter. But I remember reading in chapter 1 how good habits and changes they firstly and foremost come from identity. If you identify yourself as a reader, subconsciously that's going to affect you, and that's going to shape the framework, that's going to shape the choice landscape in which you decide to do things. The way that you act, your behaviors are often in alignment with how you perceive yourself. And I just want to say, having friends, good friends around you, just friends who know you and know your purpose and know who you are as well, see you through that same lens, is so important, because when you lose sight of that for yourself, they're there to remind you, they're there to pick you up when you're down, and vice versa. So at times where you're not necessarily behaving or acting or making decisions that are in alignment with who you are and who your friends know you to be, they should be there to challenge you, to just push you a little bit and be like, hey Francesca, I saw you doing this, like I know that that isn't who you are. So yeah, like having good friends is pivotal, because guys, you're not going to be 100 all the time. You're not going to be at level 100. There are going to be times that are more challenging, and you need community, good friends around you, and that is something that I've learned. So the last 4 years, or the last 6 years of medical school, I am really grateful. I have changed immensely as an individual. I've changed as a woman. I've changed as a Christian. I've changed as a professional. I find it so fascinating how like all of this stemmed from, or began from, like me failing my exams in second year during COVID, which on paper probably was one of the worst parts of my life. But actually it was transformed for something that was great. God gave me an identity that was unshakable. It's what sustains me. It's what keeps me going. And later on, when I went on to fail further exams, or for example, be rejected from certain things, I found out that I was more resilient, my confidence was unshaken, and compared to like my colleagues and my friends who'd also failed their exams, there was that sense of peace. Like I had a peace that didn't make sense given the fact that I just failed my exam. So I think even for those who aren't Christian, like identifying yourself in something that is more unmovable, that is more unshakable, that is more stable is super important, especially in careers such as medicine, where I need to find the statistic, but a large proportion of professionals in this field will fail at certain points, whether it be in medical school or whether it be in like the myriad of further exams that we have in our training. You are not defined by your failure, nor are you limited by it. And that is something that I am so grateful that I got to learn early on in medical school. And I know that it's gonna shape me and has shaped me to become like a better person. So guys, that was the end of my video. Thank you so much if you watched till the end. I hope that I was able to encourage at least one person. I hope that in my small vulnerability in sharing my story, I was able to reach out to someone who may be able to relate. I hope that I was able to encourage people to find their identity outside of their performance, outside of their jobs, outside of their possessions and their abilities, but rather in something that is more stable. Please subscribe if you still haven't, and I don't know why, you know, you've watched the past 20 minutes and you still haven't subscribed. Subscribe right now. With all that said, guys, I will love you and leave you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.